Tristan, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hey man, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sweet. That's always good.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
Good, yeah. Just at a little Airbnb in the forest or jungle or whatever they call it here in Australia.
That's beautiful, brother. How long have you been there?
4 weeks. Yeah, it's just my
Oh, wow.
last week here. Yeah, so visiting my girlfriend and yeah, it's a long trip, so
Mhm.
got to make it worthwhile to
You're
fly out that
traveling
way.
back to Wyoming?
I'm going back to Austin first
Okay.
on Sunday because I figured, a lot of the homies are in Austin
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of podcast guests to interview there. So I was like, oh, might as well, if I'm flying, just go to Austin and then go back.
Podcast
Because
guests, are you flying there with Ryan as well?
no, Ryan was just there, so
Mhm.
he won't be joining. But yeah, gonna interview a few folks. A lot of Bitcoiners are in Austin. Obviously, a lot of health
Mhm.
folks are in Austin as well. So
Beautiful.
yeah,
From summer to winter, pretty quickly.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of weird, but
Mhm.
okay, hold on.
Beautiful, brother. Can you hear
See
me?
how this. Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just.
Perfect. So, let's get started. What's your story? Who are you, Tristan? What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, wow, that's a fun one, right? So, I mean, a lot of these principles that I preach, I live by. Actually, some of them I grew up kind of appreciating nature. Used to go hiking and being in the outdoors a lot. My
Mhm.
mom's from Austria, so kind of got lucky that she was really into nature, hiking, and high quality food, the home cooked meals. However, definitely took the standard American route as I got into high school and in university and college. And I played soccer in college, engineering student, extremely busy, extremely kind of high functioning, I guess you could call it, and still did a lot of the typical college things, the degenerate lifestyle, sleeping not a lot, drinking a lot of coffee and alcohol. But yeah, I had one too many concussions in at the very end of 2017. Had one that put me over the edge. It was actually after my soccer career ended, but I sustained definitely a few from playing soccer in college. And then, yeah, lost my health really. I didn't know that I had one. So the acute recovery
Mm.
phase was very, was I just messed everything up. I did everything wrong in that first few weeks because I didn't know I had a concussion. I drank, I went skiing, I
Mm.
did everything you're not supposed to do.
Mhm.
And so I didn't get better, right? I had all these symptoms that are classic concussive like symptoms, daily headaches, extreme fatigue, extreme irritability, sensitivity to noise, light, sound. And I really didn't realize until a few months later when it took me a long time to get a neurology appointment.
Wow.
And I was really excited to have that appointment with the doctor because I thought I had a concussion, but I wasn't really sure. Because what happened was I just lost consciousness and hit my head. So I didn't really have any recollection of what happened. And then
Mhm.
I go to this appointment, and the neurologist, I do an EEG and assesses my symptoms. He's like, yeah, you definitely have a concussion. And I was in that moment, like extremely excited, much looking forward to being able to get better because once you identify a problem, you can typically identify a solution or a path towards progression. But then the next moment, he said, there's nothing to specifically do to get better besides just take it easy and ease back into your lifestyle that you lived before. And in that moment, again, it was, yeah, from extreme high point to low point because I didn't understand how there could be nothing that they could recommend specifically to get better. And I had already been trying to ease into the lifestyle. Again, I went from being a very high functioning, playing soccer 30 plus hours a week, studying 30 plus hours a week, to now I'm sleeping 12 hours a night just to get through my coursework, which was very light in that semester compared to previous ones. Didn't play soccer anymore, didn't exercise really at all, couldn't walk across campus without being extremely fatigued.
Wow.
So I was really sad, depressed, and I barely finished out that semester. Was very much lucky to have a internship in Oregon that summer. So I took advantage of that and no schoolwork. I had an internship, so I did spend a lot of time on the computer there. but I was able to get out in nature a lot on the weekends, go camping, hiking, and that really reinvigorated my love for the outdoors. And I realized it started to feel better. So I got this momentum going, started like a daily meditation practice, and just realized it was like, hey, I was kind of stubborn, right? Like I was like, there's no way this is the new normal for me. Like I need to get back to being able to, exercise and think critically at a high level. This is what I'm all about. So I wasn't taking no for an answer. And even if I could get like 10, 20, 30% better, to me, that would make leaps and bounds of difference. So I became really motivated. And as I started to feel a little bit better from being out in nature, and maybe that was from, you know, not looking at screens for a weekend, not being around all these non-native EMFs, just kind of being in a place of healing instead of one that's very overstimulating, which
Hmm.
is pretty much all of our modern world in terms of city day-to-day living. And yeah, I started to feel better, and then I started researching, consuming podcasts, books, YouTube videos, whatever. I realized this whole community, right, to self-healing, and I dove deep into it. So that was in 2018. I started to implement a lot of lifestyle habits, interventions that ultimately made me feel a lot better. So over the next 6 months before I graduated, I started feeling a ton better. I was able to slowly get back into exercising. And then I kind of overdid that, overzealous a bit, and ran a marathon after not running for a year. But I was so excited, and I still had some lingering symptoms, but they just started to slowly fade away, less often and less severe. And that was in 2019. And since then, I've kind of just gotten hooked on health optimization, and that led me down a lot of rabbit holes, right? It led me down a decentralized rabbit hole at a high level. It led me down nutrition, food system, got me. I was kind of into Bitcoin and crypto in college at the end, but then it made me rethink that whole entire perspective of why I was into it. And I realized I was into all these things for the same reason, that I was able to be in control of my life once again, right? This injury, this brain injury, post concussive syndrome, it took me out of the driver's seat. It took me out of control of my life. I was so limited. I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do. I had to say no all the time, even though I wanted to go do things, because I knew it wouldn't be worth it from a symptom management perspective. So I
Hmm.
never wanted to feel like that again. I never wanted to outsource the quality of my life to other people again. And I obviously got wronged by the centralized system telling me there was nothing I could do to recover. So this
Yeah.
all culminated into kind of like the person I am today. And then I realized I was really into health, and then getting more and more into Bitcoin. So I decided to write a book called Bitcoin and Beef in 2021 that was all about decentralization of our food and monetary systems. I was going to call it Bitcoin and biohacking, but then I thought that word was just really cringe.
Yeah.
So even though it's called Bitcoin and Beef, it's really about health, and then specifically the food system at a high level. And then, yeah, since I wrapped that up, just been diving deeper and deeper into research about health optimization and using my background in electrical engineering to facilitate a new perspective on really electromagnetism in our biology. So
Mm.
that's the TLDR, I guess. It's a long story, but it's been such an exciting past 5 years, because it's sad, but for most people, they need to have something bad happen in their life to
Yeah.
make a severe change, just completely change the trajectory of their life. And I needed that. I was getting ready to graduate college, didn't really know what I was super passionate about or what purpose I was going to have. And that's a struggle for many young adults, right? They go to school their whole life to go to college to get a job, and then they get that job, and then they're just like, what next? And they
Yeah.
realize it's not fulfilling. So I'm very thankful that although the suffering was, hard to overcome, it made me who I am today. And now I can spread this message to positively affect change to as many people as possible, and empower them to regain their health.
Yeah. And the suffering was a gift. It's something that I see very common in the like the health space where people take their health for granted until it's taken away from them. And that's where their journey starts. That's where their awareness starts. So it's a very similar story.
Yeah, you don't know what you have until it's gone, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's a very cliche saying, but at the end of the day, it makes you realize what's important because if you don't have your health, you can't do anything, right? And you can ask anyone who's more advanced in age or has had a chronic health issue, they will give any amount of money or they would give anything to just have like 20% better health because then they could do slightly more things.
Of
So
course.
as young people, right, as teenagers, as young adults, it's so easy to take this for granted because their
Mhm.
bodies are pretty resilient until the toxic onslaught is just too much and something manifests eventually. But the real problem is now we're seeing that even younger and younger, so
Yeah.
it's even more scary.
Yeah, it is unfortunate. I think degeneracy is happening even younger and younger. I see it with kids my age where they completely take, their health for granted and smoke all day, drink all day, until something happens.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's what has to happen. And talking about so you're really into non-native EMFs right now, and I understand you have a electrical engineer background. Why did you go for that path?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of this stuff I'm talking and learning way more about now. I was always really interested, again, I got into what you would call biohacking like 4 years ago. Started wearing blue light blockers, started turning my phone on airplane mode, like being aware of all these things, but never really dove deep because then I started to focus on my book. But now that I've had time in the past year and a half to really dive a bit deeper, you uncover just how important electromagnetism is in our biology, how we are foundationally electromagnetic beings, that this is dictating, all of the functions in our biology, all the cellular communication. It's, the majority of input signals, light, food, circadian rhythms, just the biomagnetics of the earth and the electromagnetic fields of the earth, how we're designed to be in tune with them. And it just makes a lot of sense to everything I believed before that, right? That like we are meant to be in nature. We were designed to be in nature. So the EMF space is something, obviously, as an electrical engineer, I naturally gravitated towards. But as I learned more about the biology piece, I realized just how important it is and how it's probably the most pervasive environmental toxin
Mm,
that nobody's talking about or that's conveniently left out of the discussion because it's inconvenient. We have technology. I'm using technology right now. And just for example, I have to use an adapter for my laptop charger here in Australia, and that's not grounded. So when you have
mm,
an ungrounded laptop charger, you're just getting blasted with electric fields when
yeah.
you're using your laptop when it's plugged in. So I
Mm,
was like, I can't, I'm not going to sit in front of a computer for 4 hours when it's charging ungrounded because of that. So it's like making sure that I'm have my laptop charged before this podcast. And it really does make a difference because if you're doing this all day long, you are, you're just being exposed to these EMFs at such a high level, way higher than of course we'd ever be designed to. But the thing is, to answer your question, I'm kind of just giving an example there because that's something I just did. But really, EMFs, they're very complicated. It's a complicated subject. If you don't have a physics background or maybe an electrical engineering background, it's probably going to be very confusing. It's going to be hard to read the research on what matters, hard to understand if there's all these safety standards, safety limits. Are they adequate? Are they inadequate? And what do they actually mean? What is the difference between electric fields, magnetic fields, radio frequencies? And yeah, most people don't know this. Obviously, I had to relearn some areas of this, but I had that background knowledge being an electrical engineer, and then it actually just made me excited. It made
mm,
me it made me really excited to use my engineering background to help people better understand this topic. So I would say it's probably the first time I've actually been excited, really excited, passionate about electrical engineering is now that I can apply it to health. So that's kind of why I realized this is just an under discussed topic, and then I can help people better understand how important this is because you go
mhm.
and look at the research. there's so much research. There's
Mhm.
hundreds, thousands of studies showing harmful effects, and nobody's talking about it because big tech, the government, utilities, they've been just sweeping this under the rug for
Mhm.
decades. And now we use so much technology. It's just so ubiquitous that yeah, it's just really inconvenient for people. But that doesn't mean you have to go back to the caves to be healthy. We can just be a bit smarter about how we use our technology.
Mhm. So talking about that, non-native EMFs are incredibly abundant in the world we live in nowadays. I mean, they're everywhere, and it's almost as if you can't live without them today. Um, so why would you consider, or if you consider non-native EMFs to be one of the biggest threats to our health?
Yeah, because of that exactly, right? They're unavoidable. They are only increasing in magnitude of exposure, right? We just 10 years ago, we'd probably be exposed to a fraction of the non-native EMFs we are to today. We are exposed to today. 5G rollout, there's just more and more wireless communication infrastructure being built on top of existing infrastructure. There's just more smart devices, smart homes, smart everything, more connectivity, Internet of Things. These things are not very smart, by the way. That's the clue in, and you still have all the baseline exposure from just electrical power in our outlets, from our electrical grid that we're using on a daily basis. So it's just continuing to climb,
Mhm.
and that's compounded with all the other toxic exposures in our environment. So we're just way more exposed to toxins than ever before. And this one is specifically increasing up and to the right with no end in sight, right? Like everything else kind of is tapering off or people becoming more aware of it, but the tech part of it, people are only just using more and more technology.
Mhm.
So this is why I like to talk about it. And then yeah, the research is there. There's so much research showing harmful effects, and yeah, it's kind of like undeniable. It's actually shocking. Like I even get surprised. I can literally type in, like we did a podcast with Zaid,
Mhm.
that comes out on Friday, which will be out probably before this is out. And he was just mentioning ultrasounds, and I was like, oh, I never thought about ultrasounds. I googled, because they push. We're talking about his pregnancy, childbirth experience, and he is like, yeah, we weren't comfortable doing, like, they recommend an ultrasound like once every 3 to 4 weeks now in pregnancy, which is insane. And I was like, I wonder about EMFs, because ultrasounds obviously using a frequency in the megahertz range. I think it's like 2 to 20 megahertz, to actually see through your body. And let it you know let it be known that I Googled a ultrasound and EMF impact quickly, and there's a few studies that show higher ultrasounds or higher quantity of ultrasounds during pregnancy leads to negative health effects to the child. And that's that's just like one example. And there's everything. There's fertility, reproductive issues, neurodegenerative diseases. It's all chronic diseases pretty much, because it comes down to mitochondria and causing mitochondrial dysfunction, and that's where EMFs are really pervasively affecting our health and in a negative direction. So it's never been more important to be resilient and think about these things, because as I said in the beginning here, right, they're unavoidable. There's no, like, you're never going to be able to avoid all EMFs, but you can do a hell of a job if you mitigate kind of like 80-90% by just changing small things in your environment, how you use technology. It make a big difference.
Yeah. So what can we do to mitigate them, especially nowadays?
Yeah, so you have to think about your common sources, and to me, right, it's you're spending a lot of time on your cell phone, your laptop, and in your home. And what I like to preach is just a few things. And again, I think I told you as well to mention to the listeners, I've created an EMF course that hopefully will be out by the time this podcast is out in the next couple of weeks, to outline all of this. Like, I go over the basics of physics so you can actually understand what an electromagnetic wave is, what a photon is, because that's really important on how it affects our biology. If you want to know why it's so bad for us, you kind of have to understand how it works, how it functions, and how our biology functions. So I go into all that. I go into mitigation tactics, and then I also go into measuring with things like an EMF meter, a tri-field,
Mm,
which is kind of standard home stuff. And yeah, the basic mitigation tactics I like to preach is distance is your best friend. Um,
mm,
if you can't eliminate the source, which is always number one, right? If you're not using something, turn it off, especially if it's an ungrounded appliance. Like I mentioned, if you just have like a podcast mixer or a laptop charger and you don't need it to be plugged in, or a blender or a space heater, anything. If you're not using it currently and it's not like dead, like your laptop, and it needs to be charged and it's ungrounded, two-prong plug, that is going to generate a massive electric field that radiates outwards 6 to 8 feet in your home, and that's going to increase your exposure tremendously
mhm,
to for no reason, right? Like you're not even using this technology; it's just plugged in. And
mhm,
the problem is that when it's plugged in, although it's not powered with current, it's powered with voltage. So that's why it's generating an electric field, not a magnetic field. But electric fields then induce a voltage on your body. So you can actually measure, and what I post on Instagram and on Twitter a good amount is measuring AC body voltage. So you can
mhm,
actually measure the voltage that technology is inducing on your body, which AC alternating current never existed until we invented electrical power, thanks to Nikola Tesla in the late 1800s. So this never existed. Most of nature is operating on DC. Our bodies fine tuned for that. We do oscillate and have certain electromagnetic fields at low frequencies, but we're really meant to run on direct current. So AC is definitely problematic, and that's being induced all around us. So it's just causing these health issues to pop up over time because it's causing a mitochondrial burden on our body. So unplug stuff that you're not using. That's really, to me, an easy one. But if you can't eliminate it, distance is your best friend. Distance because of inverse square law. So if you move like 2 feet away, you'll get, or just next 2x of unit away, you'll get a 4x reduction, or put 3 times the distance from you, you get a 9x reduction in the intensity of the electromagnetic field. So inverse square law is really important and really helpful. So you don't need to be freaking out about everything. You just need to be thinking about where are the sources in my house, the things I'm using. It's like your phone, don't carry it on your body. Don't ever have your phone on your body. Don't hold it up to your ear. Use wired headphones, use speakerphone. You actually can go on the website or the look up the warning labels for iPhone, and they will tell you to actually never put it on your body. Always keep like 5 to 20 millimeters of distance. And then
mhm,
you go and look up like some of these CEOs like Steve Jobs and other people, they never even let their kids
mhm.
use this stuff. They know, they're smart guys, right? They know how electromagnetic fields work. They know that this was a hot topic in the 70s, electro pollution. So now we're adding this radio frequency component into it. Wi-Fi, for example,
Or
is
sit on.
it was just everywhere, right? Like you can't even do anything about it. You just walk in a park now, and my park in my hometown in Wyoming has freaking Wi-Fi. It's a joke, but it is what it is, and there's nothing we can do about it. So all you can do is mitigate your own exposures. So your cell phone, not having it on your body, turning it on airplane mode when you're not using it, or just connecting to Wi-Fi. Like if you're at home, just turn it on airplane mode, but then turn the Wi-Fi on, because if you have the Wi-Fi and like your data on, like LTE, you're just getting
Mhm,
twice the exposure for no reason.
mhm,
So it's something to think about. And then really the number one recommendation is prioritize your sleep situation, or sleep sanctuary is
mhm.
what we like to call it in the EMF space. Create a sleep sanctuary, because if you are not repairing at night through autophagy, apoptosis, which is programmed cell death, the cleanup mechanisms of our body,
Mhm.
which is highly regulated by melatonin and light. And what most people don't understand is that EMFs are non-visible light. So the electromagnetic
Whoa.
spectrum is it's all light. So it's just a different frequency. 5G is almost infrared light. Like it's actually getting very close. 6G is actually going to be approaching infrared light frequencies. So
Wow.
people don't understand that EMFs are light. What do we know about light at night? It's bad for sleep.
The
That
very
would never have existed in any form. But obviously, Wi-Fi wouldn't have existed in any regard, 2.4 gigahertz in any regard
yeah.
in human history. But now that we have that at night, it's even more disruptive to sleep. So I just recommend creating sleep sanctuary. What does that mean? Turn off your Wi-Fi at night.
Mm.
If you can hardwire your internet, obviously that's ideal, but a lot of people can't do that. So just turn off your Wi-Fi at night. If you have roommates, if you live in an apartment, high rise, it's maybe not as effective, but it's still, there's something you can do. You could even get a timer outlet,
Mm.
EMF products that actually work,
To shut up
just
the internet.
outlet timers. My dad used to use these all the time when we would go on a vacation to turn the lights off for
Mm.
lights on for a couple hours a day. They're like 10, $20, Amazon, Lowe's, Home Depot, wherever. And if you have roommates that stay up really late, just negotiate with them. Be like, all right, can we at least turn the Wi-Fi off from like 2 to 5 a.m., 1 to
Yeah.
5 a.m., even 4 hours? You are reducing your exposure because you're cutting that duration. The duration of the exposure is extremely, extremely important. And a lot of these studies show that if you have chronic exposure for like greater than 48 hours, that's when 99% of the studies like show harmful effects. If it's less than 24 hours, if it's less than just 5 hours, the percentage of harmful effects is far lower. But when you get into that chronic exposure realm, it's
Mhm.
way, way higher. And that's why the sleep part is really, really important because, again, you're giving your body an opportunity to repair at night from all the shit you threw at it during the day, all the cellular damage, the oxidative stress, the mitochondrial dysfunction that might have been caused from the day's living can be reversed, can be cleaned up at night, at least partially. But if you're not doing that, you're not even giving your body a fighting chance. So
Mm.
I just think of it like a daily battle.
Mhm.
And every day we're exposed to some things. Every night we're repairing. Over 10, 20, 30, 40 years, the culmination of how much was degraded and how much is repaired is aging. And if you are never repairing, you're going to age a whole lot faster and you are going to get chronic disease a lot faster.
Mhm.
So it's that daily battle. And if you don't prioritize sleep and that sleep sanctuary, you're going to be losing a lot faster than pretty much anyone should be, and that's only accelerating with our toxic modern world.
So EMFs, well, non-linear EMFs affect our sleep because they're a form of light, correct?
Yeah, and it's yeah, well, it affects our body in many ways, but that's when we're even more sensitive
Mhm.
is at nighttime. So it affects our body throughout the day,
Mhm.
just as much, or not just as much, I should say. It affects our body 24 hours a day. Like,
Mhm.
we're not built to take photons in the frequency of 2.4 gigahertz. There's nothing that existed until we invented this in terms of that frequency level. If you put there's a tiny, tiny amount of radio frequencies that passes through the atmosphere. But if you put one cell phone on the moon, it would be greater than all of the natural radio frequencies we'd ever be exposed to. Like, it's such a minuscule amount. And just in general, for all EMFs, there's researchers that say we're now exposed to like 1 quintillion times more EMFs than we would have been before the invention of electricity. That's from Professor Ali Johansson out of Sweden. And it's not an overstatement. Like, we are electromagnetic beings, but the intensity of exposures from the natural EMFs, from the sun, from the
The earth.
Schumann's resonance, from the magnetic field of the earth, from the molten iron core creating that magnetic field, they're very small in intensity. And now we just bombarded our body with so much non-native EMFs that are way higher in intensity, and they're just around us all the time. There's no cyclicality based on weather, based on season, based on solar activity. and that's causing the signal to noise ratio to be lower than ever. So we just live in this world where the noise has now superseded the signal
Mm.
by, magnitudes, and that causes chaos in our biology.
So
But
what's
it's the sleeping component, just to go back to your question, the
yeah.
sleeping part is like, that's even more detrimental, right? So this
Mhm,
is all detrimental, but at night, if you're exposed to all this, you're just losing that battle
mhm.
faster and faster.
So what's the reason that these electromagnetic frequencies are affecting or doing harm to the body? Like, what's the reason our mitochondria become dysfunctional after being exposed to these non-native electromagnetic frequencies?
Yeah, and this is a great topic and one that I could talk about probably for hours, and one that I highlight in my course. I've talked about in my podcast. Is it's up for debate. Actually, a lot of these researchers like Ollie Johansson and Martin Powell, they talk about like activation of these voltage-gated calcium channels, which causes calcium influx into the cell. There's a ton of studies just showing and causing oxidative stress of the mitochondria, which is basically just a loss of redox homeostasis when there's so many free radicals produced that your body's natural antioxidants can't keep up. That's the whole antioxidant theory of aging, why we should take all these supplemental antioxidants to combat free radicals. But that's a terrible idea because they don't even work well. And reactive oxygen species are important signaling molecules. The mitochondria is an important signaling molecule, like for our immune system and for causing adaptation and reformation depending on the inputs like seasonality and food, for example. So what EMFs fundamentally, in my opinion, what those guys are talking about, those are true, but they're just more downstream, right? So
Mhm,
what's the most upstream is what I just said. We are electromagnetic beings,
mhm,
and we run off of certain frequencies, certain inputs, right? So inputs to the body are light, our food, our temperature, oxygen, and these are telling our body what season it is, how warm it is, and are we able to synthesize vitamin D from the sun, for example. That will dictate how uncoupled our mitochondria can be, and then how effective they are at producing heat. So for example, like if it's the winter in Wyoming, which I'm going back to, there's no UVB, I'm not producing any vitamin D. So it's going to be telling my mitochondria, okay, we could probably, and the temperature is cold, and especially if I'm embracing that, I'm not wearing 25 layers, and I'm actually going outside in the cold, I'm cold plunging to even upregulate that
mhm,
input signal further. My body's gonna be like, damn, we need to produce more heat,
mhm,
and that'll allow those signals to work. So as an engineer, I just think about this as a system, right? We need to give the proper input signals to have the proper output, and the output is energy, it's heat production, it's really just function of our biology based on the environment that we are living in. But if we're not embracing that environment, then we're not going to get the right output. So
mhm,
that's pretty much like what I think about as mitochondrial dysfunction 101. And what EMFs are doing, they're just providing the wrong input signal. They're providing a foreign photonic source that's at frequencies that our body is not programmed to do much with, right? Like we're programmed to run off light in the visible UV infrared spectrum. And then, there's certain frequencies like the Schumann's resonance, which is low, less than 100 hertz. 7 to 10 hertz is the first harmonic. So then when we have this signal of 50, 60 hertz from our electrical power grid, you're just confusing the body. So you're causing this dysfunction. And you can get, this is really high level. And just to step it down further for like an example, and we've done podcasts on this on Decentralized Radio with Carrie Bennett and the Grounded Athlete a little bit, is talking about the water in our body, the water communication, protein communication matrix. This is really a very electromagnetic process and
mhm,
system. And we know that water traps electromagnetic signals, kind of acts as an antenna, and structuring this water is necessary to exclude toxins, to have sufficient proton and electron flow. And really, electromagnetic fields from technology completely disrupts this process, completely disrupts the functionality of water. So you get impaired cellular communication, you get impaired energy production, and that ultimately leads as well to mitochondrial dysfunction. So you create this negative feedback loop. And there's just so many instances of this that we're just beginning to uncover, really. The water piece is big for me. I would say that's probably the most important piece where
Mhm.
EMFs cause harm, because water, we're 50 to 70% water,
Mhm.
depending on how old you are and how unhealthy you are. And that's by volume. By molecule count, we're 99% water. So we're water mostly,
Mhm.
and water is used. No one talks about water being really important. They just tell you to drink water, which actually the water you drink does pretty much nothing. It's the
Mhm.
water your mitochondria produce at complex 4 that's probably more important than ATP itself.
Mhm.
But again, nobody talks about this in centralized biology. So that water is, one of the main semiconductors, conductors, just it conducts protons and electrons, and again, it operates electromagnetically. So if we have these electromagnetic fields, and folks like Gerald Pollack, who studies this structured water, has said on podcasts as well that infrared light expands the exclusion zone in the structured water the most, 3 to 4x. What he put a Wi-Fi router next to it, and it completely collapsed it. So you're
Wow.
completely collapsing your water battery, the ability for water to really act as this communication hub and also operate in these coherent domains. Like, we don't know all the depths of function from the water network in our biology, but it's we know it's so important. And when you do this research from folks like Maywan Ho and Emilio Del Giudice, you realize that non-native EMFs are completely disrupting the ability for water to function properly in our body, and that's leading to a whole host of issues. So I think that's one of the most upstream ways that EMFs cause dysfunction, and that will lead to mitochondrial dysfunction as well. But there are other ways, and ultimately it all leads to what you call oxidative stress, which is
Mhm.
just cause cellular damage from free radical formation over time. And yeah, it's really interesting, and something you can geek out about a lot, and something I'm going to talk a lot more about and dive deeper into in future courses, future modules, future podcasts. Like, we're just really, really uncovering kind of the depths of this now, and it's exciting. But
Yeah.
again, simple conclusion is we're not designed to operate on these foreign frequencies, these
Mhm.
foreign fields at this intensity level. And really, our electromagnetic biology is pretty precise at a pretty minuscule intensity. So
Mhm.
the signal to noise ratio, if that's one thing you got to remember, the noise has never been higher.
Mhm.
And that cause, imagine trying to communicate in, if you've ever been in Central Station in New York City, or a subway, and say there's 100 people, an amusement park, Disney World, I don't know, airport, say there's 100 people around you, and you're just trying to talk to one person next to you.
Yeah.
Think of how much harder it is to talk to that person next to you when
Mhm.
there's 100 people around you. Now think of how easy it is for, say, me and you, Alfonso, to just talk if we're in the same room with nobody around.
Mhm.
That's because there's no noise, right? There's no noise messing up that communication. So EMFs are really just that noise in the room. They're causing this dysfunction by causing a tremendous amount of noise in our biology's cellular communication. And that leads to issues. I'm not going to be able to hear what you're saying as well. And I'm going to misinterpret things. And I'm
Mhm.
going to make decisions based on that misinterpretation. That's going to lead to, chaos down the road. So it's a nice example. And the more and more we pile on, like maybe in the 60s, there was 10 people in the room from non-native EMFs. Maybe in the 80s, 90s, there was 25 people in the room. Now there's probably 1,000 people in the
Yeah.
room, and they're getting tightlier and tightlier packed as we just keep coming out and keep using technology more and more.
Yeah. It's mind blowing. So, what's the mission for the course?
Really, to just give a foundational understanding, because I'm not going to lie, I see a lot of health influencers talking about EMFs. I see people shilling products that they have no idea how it works, if it works. They just got an affiliate link and probably a nice kickback, and nobody really understands EMFs, that,
Mhm.
like, straight up. So I just wanted to, and I've seen other courses out there and things like that. And I just don't think they're very good. I don't think anyone is taking this holistic view. And it's something I realized I've talked to and collaborated with a lot of the EMF experts in the space that are actually electrical engineers or actually been EMF consultants for years, and ones that are building solutions that actually work, not like woo woo $1,000 harmonizers to give you a teaser. And yeah, they actually don't agree on a lot of things. You know, there's dirty electricity, there's electric fields, there's magnetic fields, there's 5G. You know, what's worse? What's more important to worry about? So I wanted to just lay it out for people, right? So the way I structured it was that the first section is really like electromagnetism 101. What are waves? What are photons? What's the spectrum? Talking about light, non-visible light. Because if you don't understand the units, right, like volts per meter, milligauss, microtesla, power density is how you measure RF. If you don't know any of these units and you don't know frequency, wavelength relationship, it's not that complicated. It's like a couple equations, a couple units, understanding photons, and then you can go and like read a research paper and be like, oh yeah, wow, that makes sense. Oh, actually, that's fascinating that that frequency, which is so close to like Wi-Fi, for example, like microwaves operate at 2.5 gigahertz, 2.45, I think, to heat up your food. Wi-Fi is 2.4 gigahertz. It's basically the same exact frequency.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's something to think about. How are microwaves working to heat up your food? They're just oscillating the water molecules at this frequency and dehydrating them to warm them up. So what
Mm.
happens when you think you sit in an airplane that's a Faraday cage that's
Does the
not a
same to you.
gaping, it's slow, and then you get off the plane and you're so dehydrated. Like you could
Mm.
chug 10 bottles of water and you'd still be so dehydrated. Like that's why. It's not it's not some woo-woo thing. It's actually just science. It's physics. And yeah, so that's the first section. Then I go into the history of it. Wow, we've been debating about electropollution since the 70s, since even earlier. People use electricity to treat health issues in the 1700s. It's actually a fascinating history. And again, I'm not an expert on that. I'm not a historian, but it's fun to just show and talk about actually how the government in the U.S. covered this up, and other nations like Russia are much more stringent. And then going into the safety standards of, are they adequate? What do they even mean? Are they protecting our health? How are they, measured? Of course, they're not. And how that affects, me and you differently. How that affects our children. Children,
Mhm.
really, I get really pissed off when you think about how detrimental this is for children. They're probably 50 to 100 times more susceptible to EMFs. It depends on their age and their size, of course. We're talking like young children, like maybe 1 to 5 year olds. They're so small. So if a cell phone is, going through our head just a couple centimeters, it could be going completely through their skulls. They have higher water content and
Yeah.
they're developing brains, right? So they're more malleable, but they're more susceptible. That's where I get really scared, frustrated, and passionate about this topic, is for the children, for the next generation. Because now, what are we doing? Giving them cell phones younger and younger. Technology based learning. Everyone gets a laptop. When I went to high school, no one had a laptop. No, thankfully, I didn't get a cell phone or a smartphone until I was like 16, 17, I think. So it was
Mhm.
like just on the cusp of kind of, I guess, this new age. And at least I was somewhat developed at that age. But iPad babysitters, right? The baby's crying. They could be 2 years old, and they're just given an iPad.
Yeah.
And you think about the EMFs, the blue light, and you know how sensitive their biology is. It's so sad. And then you look at the safety standards; they're all based on grown adult males that are like 220 pounds, and
Mhm.
they're being broken anyway, and nobody talks about it. So talk about that. Talk about kind of just what I just went over, how it actually affects our biology, the different mechanisms, mitochondrial dysfunction, and then what you can do to mitigate. So I mentioned some of that as well, the easy solutions, and then how you can measure it with an EMF meter, a body voltage kit. So it's called EMF 101, right? Like this
Mm.
isn't super in depth. It's very all encompassing. It's a holistic perspective of what I think the average person can really benefit from knowing in regards to EMFs, and then actually take actionable steps to
Mhm.
reduce their exposure tremendously and improve the health of their family and loved ones. And then, of course, I'm going to come out with future modules that are way deeper dives on like 5G, water, just biological mechanisms of action, and then talking more and more about biological semiconductors as well, since again, that's somewhere I can really use my background in engineering and electrical engineering to help bridge that gap to biology. So yeah, it's anybody can take it, and I think it'll really provide a sound understanding of what action matters and what you can do about it. It's not like sugar coated. It's pretty digestible. I talk about what works, what doesn't, like all these harmonizers, pendants, crystals, whatever. I give you my honest opinion on everything, what's actually worth spending money on. So I'm gonna try and make the course like as affordable as possible, because I just want to get this to as many people as I can, because I
Mhm.
think it is really important. And I don't want to sell any products really. I just want to sell education, because
Mhm.
that's what actually gets people out of their situation that they're
Of
in, is
course.
empowering them through education.
Mhm.
So
That's beautiful, man. I'm excited to get into the course because this is a topic that I've been really kind of studying recently, but I'm really intrigued by it. Um, so here's something else. Mortality rate has gone ridiculously high in the last couple of years. Nowadays, most death comes from chronic disease, and just a couple of decades ago, it was dominated by viral diseases. What do you think this means?
yeah, and it's something I wrote about in my book as well. It's like the first chapter is the lifespan is one of the most faulty indicators of societal health.
Mm,
Um, Actually, can't believe that anybody with credibility actually cites this as a reasonable metric, because before 1900, or even in early 1900 still, but definitely before 1900, there was so much death from mortality, childhood infectious diseases,
mhm,
childbirth from both the child and the mother. So you people did live to like 60, 70, 80, 90 years old 200 years ago, 500 years ago, probably even 1,000 years ago. It wasn't as common, maybe because they just died from more things, and men went to war and died from that as well. But when they did reach this advanced age, they were healthier. I mean, we're talking men were fighting in wars if they didn't actually get killed up in their 70s. And you can read stories of I've read a book on Alexander the Great recently, and you can read about all these things. Like look at the Hadza, for example, in Tanzania. They have a high infant mortality rate from like infections mostly, I believe. But once they get past that age of like 10, 12, 14 years old, they are thriving. And most of the men who are 70, 80 years old, they're still hunting every day. The women who are 80, 70, 80 years old, they're digging for tubers. They're working
mhm,
well into their late years. So I think lifespan is a very faulty metric. But even with its faults, it's
mhm.
now declining in the United States. Like the past few years, it's gone down. We're one of the only developing nations that this is the case for, and that's because of chronic disease prevalence. 4 in 10 adults, I believe, have one chronic disease. Or sorry, 6 in 10 adults have one chronic disease. 4 in 10 adults have two or more. I mean, this is ridiculous because we're
That's
talking about diseases that didn't exist 150, 200 years ago, or if they did, it was like the very, very slight
it was rare.
percentage. It was
Mhm,
very rare. And yeah, I think this is all a byproduct of the modern toxic soup world that we're living in. It's all encompassing. And to me, it's everything, right? It's fun to think about what is like the biggest factor, but at the end of the day, it's everything. And everybody who writes a book or has their stance, they niche into something, right? Like I'm talking a lot about EMFs. Does that mean EMFs are the only issue in our world? No, of course
no,
not. There's so many things. It's the food is toxic. It's toxic because it's sprayed with things like glyphosate and
mhm,
atrazine, and glyphosate is one of the worst toxins and most prevalent pervasive toxins as well. I actually would say this. Here's my top 3 toxins is glyphosate, EMFs, and blue light. And blue
wow,
light is technically, an
yeah,
artificial EMF as well, in at least the context of our modern world. Those I think have moved the needle the most in like the past 20 years. But even before then, there is this slow creep up, right? And things like food, polyunsaturated fatty acids, seed oils, right? But then you can loop that in as well to, they're now all being sprayed with glyphosate, and just the chemical extraction process to create a seed oil product is disgusting, with deodorizers and color added to it. So it's everything, right? It's overall, I would encompass it like this: it's a disconnection to the life we were designed to live. Humans have been around for a million years, couple million years. I mean, the debate is ongoing, but we've been around for a long time.
Yeah.
And only in the past 10,000 years, roughly, a small percentage had this agricultural society. So that was really the main downfall, was the start of the agricultural revolution and these large population centers in society. But even then, that was like a small percentage, and we still live pretty connected lives. Like, even though there was a bit more disease prevalence, shrinking of the human skulls, human brains, lower nutritional value, and had these modern societies kind of advancing over the last 10,000 years, while some maintain their hunter gatherer status. And we saw this slow kind of trickle up of certain diseases, and that's why infectious diseases as well were a big issue.
Hmm.
But only in the past 150 years we really flipped the
Yeah.
switch when we created electricity that's abundant for everyone. And then over the past 50 to 100 years, and then of course, as I mentioned, in the past 20 to 10 to 20 years,
Yeah.
it's just this exponential increase, right, of processed foods, artificial light, artificial EMFs, just toxins galore, preservatives, plastics, endocrine disruptors. There's so many things, PFAs. It's the list goes on and on. It's actually crazy how, if you just go in some average person's house or apartment and just look at everything they wear, they use on a daily basis, what they're exposed to, they might be like 98% disconnected from what they should be doing, or those things didn't even exist like 50 years ago. They're sleeping in a hot room under, hot as in, electrically hot, EMFs everywhere, Wi-Fi on, cell phone next to their head. There's probably light shining on. They might even have the TV on while they're
Yeah.
sleeping, and they ate processed food, glyphosate covered Cheerios and Skittles for a late night snack. And but maybe it's recommended by their dietitian to stave off blood sugar regulation or something. I don't know. It's wild. And they're living on the 10th story of a high rise in a populated city, and they're cooking their food in Teflon if they ever do cook, or they're just buying everything in plastic, drinking from plastic, using body wash and soap that has oodles of chemicals, makeup. It's crazy. The clothes they wear, all plastic, polyester. So yeah, to me, it's everything, right? And it's overwhelming to most people
Hmm.
because you can get into this and easily become very neurotic, like very easily. And people look at me, they're like, dude, what you do sometimes is a bit unrealistic. Look, you don't need to be me. You're not going to be me. I've been working towards what I do now for years. Like, this has taken me years to get to this place, to realize what's important, to prioritize what's not. And I do what's convenient and what I think is important for me. I don't want you to do what I do. I want you to just be educated on what matters, what actually does make a difference for your health, and then make that decision for you and your family, because it is unrealistic to mitigate every single toxin in our environment. It's not even unrealistic. It's impossible. It's not going to happen. You're going to be exposed to this regardless, especially if you live in a populated area. There's nothing you can do about air pollution besides
Hmm.
maybe buy an air filter. But if you go outside, that's just how it goes.
Hmm.
So it's the onslaught, right? And then you throw in, vaccines and jabs and medications, and, the whole centralized pharmaceutical healthcare system that is basically just a revolving door. Like, hey, take this medicine that'll solve your one issue and then cause 3 side effects. But we have another medication for that issue as well. So don't worry, and take 5 jabs, even though they haven't been studied and they actually contain toxic chemicals as well. And yeah, give 20 of those to your kid when it's born, and there's aluminum and mercury in them depending on the year. So it's insane. Heavy metals, right? Mold. There's so much out there, right? But there's a threshold for everybody. And something I caught a lot of flack for, not a lot, but some people didn't agree with, is that it was like people are blaming the jabs too much, because you get these guys that are like, drinking a ton of alcohol, smoking, and like fat, and they'll be like, "Hey, I'm not jabbed, I'm healthy." I'm like, "No, you're not, buddy." But and then you see perfectly healthy 30-year-old who was vaccinated like dies. Like, no, they weren't perfectly healthy. They were living in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if they weren't like really, really into their health, they weren't healthy at all.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody's perfectly healthy. So it's just so much. It's exhausting to think about all this. It's really challenging to not become pissed off, not become neurotic about all the toxins that we're exposed to. So I would recommend, if you're new to this, really just chop it off one bit at a time and prioritize what you think is realistic, what's achievable,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of just progress. So all I try and preach is that consistent improvement, consistent progression in your health journey compounds over time, and it will help tremendously. But I will warn you that when you start to implement these things, you won't be able to go back and like be in certain scenarios that
Mm-hmm.
you were able to handle in the past. Like, and I realized for me the biggest struggle is how sensitive I become actually to a lot of things. So you become resilient in the sense of health, but you become so much more aware and sensitive when you start to cut out the toxins. Your body now knows it can get used to the toxic threshold for quite a while, but then
Yeah.
when you eliminate it and then reintroduce it, your body doesn't like that. So
Yeah.
just a fair warning. And I don't know if you've experienced that at all. Most people do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you get adapted to all the bullshit that's around you constantly.
Yeah, yeah, totally. So sorry if that was a long ramble, but that,
No, it's
chronic
beautiful.
disease, it's the onslaught really, and it's this inability to repair and recover at night because nobody is getting proper sleep. Nobody has that proper circadian rhythm, artificial light, EMFs, just stimulation at night, terrible sleep schedules. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
It's ruining our ability to restore our cellular damage.
Yeah. I mean, it just all comes down to being disconnected to nature because we've introduced just so many things, so many toxins, like you said, in such a little, like such little time compared to evolution that it's so detrimental to our health. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think it's not a secret, right? But it's something that everyone has their own angle on what's the most important. So take it all, take it all from different perspectives, and then apply it to your life.
So one of the reasons the podcast exists, like I already went over this with you, was that I became aware that there are certain groups that want control over the population. They want money, they want power, but it all comes down to control through medicine and health. Why do you think that's the approach?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, if you don't have your health, you're screwed, right? You become so reliant on someone to help you if you don't have your health. You're crippled in the sense, like not even physically, just in the sense of your own freedom, right? So the centralized healthcare system is set up so that you're very reliant on what they provide, whether that's medications, whether that's regular checkups, blood work, just advice in general. You're very aligned to their system and then become very reliant on it. So yeah, that's why they mandate certain things, and that's why it is a form of control, and it's not really incentivized. The incentives are all misaligned, whether that's purposefully done or not, you could debate, to get better, to be healthy. It's a very reactive system for reasons. It's not proactive. It's not talking about preventing chronic disease. Why? Because there's no money in preventing chronic disease. There's only money in treating chronic disease, and we spend trillions of dollars on healthcare, when people always complain about that. And they do that on purpose. That's economic stimulus as well, and the whole um, Keynesian economic thought. And to me, it always comes back to the money. The reason why they have to do all this is because the money is fundamentally broken. Because
Hmm.
when the money is broken, you have to keep up with this increasing debt ceiling, this increasing level of inflation. So the only way you can do that is by having more economic growth, having more economic stimulus in all these areas. So you just see over time these systems, these businesses, the productization of everything is really a result of the money being broken. So that's why we get, fake foods, factory made foods. It's scalable. They can cut margins, or they can make more profit margins and cut costs. So they're incentivized with money being broken to just make shittier and shittier foods at lower and lower cost and sell them to more and more people. And that's why we see these ultra processed foods. Now, glyphosate, why is it so heavily used? Because it's damn good, scalable way to produce more crops, in with less money.
Hmm.
And, it costs nothing to spray it. And then they figured out they could just start spraying these whole fields with airplanes instead of people, one by one on plants. And
Yeah.
then they figured out, you could use glyphosate as a desiccant for things like wheat. So it's just all about increased economic activity to keep up with this increasing debt due to our expansion of the money, since it's completely broken. So we're just spiraling out of control. And that's why, Bitcoiners are very bullish on Bitcoin, because if you fix the money, then you fix all the incentives that are aligned in the systems of health, the systems of, or healthcare, I should say, the systems across the board, technology as well, just anything we consume in our daily lives will improve if we have sound money. And the way they see it in the government is there's no turning back. So if they have this surveillance state where they can force you to spend money or be in control, a controlled person is a better consumer, right? Like if you're captured, you're going to have to buy what the government tells you to buy. You're going to have to follow their rules.
Hmm.
And that's kind of like the only way to get out of this. So it's either we blow up everything and start over from scratch, or we become like this increasingly higher control surveillance state, which is seemingly what we're trending towards. Or the third option is the correct option, which is actually slowly transitioning to a more sound monetary fiscal policy, which probably will never happen. So that's something always people ask me, like, well, what are you worried about? Bitcoin like could go to zero. Yeah, the only way Bitcoin completely loses its value proposition is if the government actually starts just executing action and doing basically the right thing. So if you trust that the government is just gonna, from here on out, starting today, starting December 1st, they're just gonna do everything that they should do. No irresponsible fiscal policy, no funding foreign wars, no, bailing out companies, just letting the economy ride, cutting taxes completely. Uh, it's not going to happen, right? There's no chance that's going to happen. So there's no chance for me that Bitcoin is not the best solution to create a financially sovereign situation for yourself and avoid being reliant on the system. So I kind of, that increased control, right? How do you avoid that? Not being reliant. And how do you become less reliant? Is you have to take control of your money and you have to take control of your health. And the only way you can take control of your health is by getting educated. And that's why you're passionate about what you do. I'm very passionate about what I do. And that's how we get this kind of momentum rolling and continue to bring more and more people along with us.
Hmm. So why are you so bullish? Why are you bullish on BTC?
Because literally everything I just said, man,
Yeah.
there's no way the government is going to do the right things. Like right now, we're at this, it's so exciting. We're at this time where they just, they injected all this money. What is it, $7-8 trillion, or was it 4 trillion? I don't remember. They injected all this money from COVID, the COVID crash. It's multiple times higher than from the economic crisis in 2008, 2009. The debt Total debt is 34 trillion almost. We're paying $1 trillion on interest rates alone now. They raised the rates to try and reestablish some credibility. And we're at this really fun inflection point where we almost know things are going to kind of like turn down for the worse. But then
Mhm.
it's like, how soon do they turn on the money printer again? So and then there's so much going for Bitcoin, right? We have BlackRock ETFs. We have just these
Mhm.
complete cleansing from all these scammy companies a couple years ago, which caused the bear market, caused the drop, which is great because now there's nothing even really holding Bitcoin back. And more people have woken up these past 3 years. More and more people are ripe for the education that's necessary to make them realize that Bitcoin is a decentralized form of money. And you see this globally as well. Argentina's new president is very bullish on Bitcoin. El Salvador has done what they've done. There's just a lot. And here in the US, we're very spoiled because we have the best fiat currency in the world. So a
Mhm.
lot of people don't realize the value proposition of Bitcoin. But if you go to other countries, their money is so fucked that they don't even have another choice. And you
Yeah.
talk about, international workers sending money, international money transfers, just the corruption of banks. We see more bank runs in the past 12 months. So we know that fractional reserve banking is a total scam. So people have, I've talked to a few people, clients of mine, health clients that are ready to be orange pilled, ready to learn more about Bitcoin. And I see it, whether they're younger, older, people are like, I should know about this, at least put X percentage of my money into this
Mhm.
because who knows what's going to happen. No one's trusting the government
Yeah.
very strongly anymore. So that's why I'm so bullish on it. I actually wish, personally, that there wasn't so much momentum because I want to just accumulate as much as possible, of course, in the next 6 to 12 months. But I would highly recommend anybody to just get more educated on it. And really, the next year, I think, is going to be big for Bitcoin, and is a great chance to get off zero. Right? You don't have to buy $20,000 worth of a whole Bitcoin. You could just buy $5 worth every week, and that's better than nothing.
Yeah. Why do you think next year is a bullish year for Bitcoin?
Well, we have the
Mhm.
halvening coming up in April, so that's when the new addition to the circulating supply, the block reward, gets cut in half. So that has led to subsequent bull runs every time in the past, but that's also been talked about that this was, you know, coincidentally a time where money was always injected into the economy. So
Mhm.
people debate whether it's the halving, the supply shock, or the shock from that, or the actual injection of money. It doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, it's just math. And when there's less of something being added every day, and more people value it from a fundamentals perspective, the price will appreciate over time. Whether that's in early 2024, late 2024, 2025. Like we know it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. And then, yeah, the BlackRock or just ETF in general will open up a ton of new money coming into Bitcoin. So that's something that'll be really helpful for the boomers of the world that don't trust self custody or what have you. But it will definitely, you could debate whether that's good or bad, and people don't like BlackRock, but it does open up a lot of money. And
Mhm.
Bitcoin does need to become bigger in size, bigger
Mhm.
in market cap in order to be more usable for actual economies of, like, say, countries. And yeah, there's just a lot of momentum going. I don't think there's a lot holding it back besides probably just
Yeah.
macroeconomic fluctuations.
Mhm.
Things could nuke, and it is a risk on asset. But if things nuke, how long before the money printer is turned back on? And then once that happens, it's just game over for Bitcoin going up and to the right. But over time, like I said, it goes up because we know that the irresponsible behavior and just math behind the supply of Bitcoin are always in its favor. So long term, it's always green. Long term, over a couple year period, it's always green.
I got my first bite of Bitcoin when it was at almost 60,000.
Well, that's how a lot of people got into. That's how, a lot of my friends, and they suffered by riding that wave down, but
Yeah.
it's all good because, next cycle or when it hits 100K or 200K, whenever that is in the future, you could be like, oh yeah, well I was stacking when it was 20K or 30K, and yeah, it feels good. So everyone learns that. It's kind of how it goes, and people always criticize how volatile it is, but I
Mhm.
mean, really, the volatility is in the injection of money into our system, and the US dollar itself. And Bitcoin is 15 years old,
Mhm.
14 years old. So it's still a super young asset. Money, whatever you want to call it, depends on your situation. And that's just exciting. So I think it aligns very well with the health community. And I hope my mission is to just educate as many people who are open to it in the health space as well.
When did you first hear about Bitcoin?
Oh, I bought a Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin for purchasing a fake ID in 2015,
Oh,
and then I
wow.
spent like most of it on a fake ID, and I had
Mhm.
like $5 left or something. And then in 2017, when I was getting popular again, I checked my account and it turned into like $120. So I was like, oh, nice. And then I bought a bunch of shit coins, learned the hard way for a few years, and then you know here we are. 2020, 2019 was like really when I had a major shift in my perspective on Bitcoin. But yeah, I've known about it for a long time. So it's even more, kicking yourself is like, oh, I should have just taken a deeper dive back then. But you're
Yeah.
just thankful to be have this conviction before most, really.
Beautiful, man. I want to talk now. I want to touch now on the sun. So I recently read, it's a really recent thread from you about ATP not being our main energy source. That was really big for me because I thought it was. So give me the reason why it's not.
Yeah, and this is a complicated discussion, and one that's it's nuanced because I also don't have like this expert background in
Hmm.
biology either. So I never had to like unlearn a lot of things as well. But basically ATP is just known as the energy currency of the cell. When you have this adenosine triphosphate, you're able to extrapolate energy by breaking the phosphate bonds. And this is kind of known as that's how cells use energy to start reactions. But I've interviewed some cool people and learned more and more about the quantum biology space, and it seems like this is not the case, or this is not the full picture, at least. And we had Dr. Arturo Herrera on our show, who's this researcher who discovered that melanin, which melanin is in our skin, in our hairs, in our cells, all our cells. Comes in a few different forms, but they pretty much all do the same thing. He discovered that melanin is able to disassociate or break the water molecule, so turning H2O into hydrogen and oxygen gas, which creates energy from that. And then it also can reform it. So it can break water into gas and then take that gas and then put it back into water. And that creates energy in the process, and also creates electrons as well, some additional electrons. And even he doesn't know the whole scope of the electron piece, which again, this is all like the frontier. This is very new. But folks like Albert St. Georgi even questioned that ATP was really enough
Hmm.
to explain all the energy in our biology, and that food, people only think we get ATP from the food we eat, and it doesn't add up. Like if you just do the energy calculations, it doesn't add up.
Hmm.
And folks like Alexander Wunsch, who's a researcher on light from Germany, have stated for years that we only get around 1/3 of our energy from food. And for a long time, I like didn't really know what he meant by that. I was like, how is that possible? And then I did the calculations. You could just Google how much energy is available to be captured from sunlight, and there is a lot. And we're talking like 30, 60 megajoules of energy in peak summer.
Hmm.
And when you eat a 2,500 calorie diet, we're talking around like, I think it's like 10 and a half megajoules. So depending on the time of year, yeah, we're only getting maybe a third, a fourth, a fifth of our energy from, and it's different types of energy, right? But we're only, from a pure just energetics perspective, that's a third, fourth, fifth of energy. And maybe in the winter, yeah, it's less, right? There's less light energy available. We probably get more percentage from food. Maybe it's 50-50. or now we're indoor living. Again, it's probably way higher percentage coming from food. So melanin is a source of that. And again, it depends what you consider energy, right? Like the food that we eat is really just getting stripped down into electrons and protons,
Mhm.
and that's entering in the electron transport chain, and those protons are being carried to form this gradient, this voltage, to be able to pump the nanomotor at the end of the electron transport chain, which creates ATP. It takes energy to create ATP, so then we could use ATP breaking that phosphate bond to use energy. But most people in the quantum space, they argue that ATP's main function is actually to create protein binding sites, and that really we get a lot of our energy through disassociation of water and from sun. So it has multiple functions, but really it just doesn't add up when you take this into account. And a lot of the early researchers who were into this bioelectricity, bioelectromagnetism, were theorizing that, but they just didn't have the answer. And
Mhm.
so Dr. Herrera's hypothesis is that it's melanin, and melanin is able to, it's the darkest pigment in the universe. It's able to absorb the entire electromagnetic spectrum and has a peak absorption in UV, but it can absorb all light, non-visible as well. And it takes that energy from the light and uses that to disassociate, break water, and also reform that water. So it's not like it's just doing this willy nilly. Like it needs an external energy source, and that's light. And that's when it comes down to like biological semiconduction in general. Semiconductors are used in all of our technology. So we know that they're really important. We know that they work. Like this is how we have all our technology. But our body uses semiconduction and has been for millions of years. So
Mhm.
this is not something new. They're a bit different. Um, but what a semiconductor is it needs an external energy stimuli to allow for electron flow, allow for that conductivity to happen. The environment needs to be right. So it's not like a metal where metals can just conduct electricity freely. It needs enough external energy. And a lot of that are pretty much all the time that external energy, which is coming in the form of light, of photonic energy from the sun, and that's allowing conduction to happen, giving the right environment again, and that's what's allowing a lot of our biological functions to happen. So it all comes back to the light, but I think when you actually run the numbers, it makes total sense because just from a total energy perspective, you realize there's, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5x more energy available from the sun than food. And food's still important. It's a source of biomass, nutrients that are
Mhm.
needed for a lot of these biological functions. But in terms of pure, and it's a source of electrons as well,
Yeah.
because photons, light is photons,
Mhm.
food is electrons. And also we get electrons from the earth, from grounding. So you need both, right? You need electrons because the photons are what excite the electrons. They receive that light energy and they become excited. They transition that band gap, and then they become, they're conducting electrons. They're moving to where they need to go in our biology. And that's important. So they're
Mhm.
different types of energy, right? Like it's energy from photons, it's electrons. But mainstream biology never talks about any of this really, and it blows my mind because it's so fascinating. And you just know, like, there's so much information out there about the ATP synthase being its nanomotor. You could watch these crazy rendered videos of how it works, and it's like you're telling me that our body has this motor inside of it that's literally taking ADP and phosphorus and creating ATP by pumping protons and using proton current and voltage to do this? Like, are you serious? This is how our biology works. This is like, again, we're using motors and semiconductors in our body. Those were invented what, 100 years, 120 years ago. Motors were, maybe, or I guess steamboat engines, stuff like that, a bit before, and semiconductors mid 20th century. I mean, this is incredible. But then it's like, and then they have the electrocardiogram reading the heart. They have the EEG reading brain waves. But that's it. Then they just stop there. Yep, that's it. That's all the electromagnetism you need to know for our
Yeah.
biology. No point of this doesn't make any sense to go further. It's all just biochemistry, and actually none of it's connected. It's all the heart is the heart and the brain is the brain. They have nothing to do with each other. Let's just have a cardiologist, neurologist, all these separate fields. It's all so siloed, and it makes no sense because we're all one being, and
Hmm.
our body works synergistically together. It works synergistically with nature, and it works synergistically with the majority of our cells that are foreign from bacteria. So a long ramble again is, yeah, I don't think ATP is this energy currency of cells. It's extremely important, like,
Hmm.
obviously,
But it's
for
not the main.
but there's more to the picture here than what everyone's talking about. But there's, still so much more to be revealed in this area. But you can for sure say without a doubt that I think we're getting a majority, or we could be getting a majority of our energy from light, depending
Hmm.
on the season. But food is obviously extremely important still. And we need to understand then the importance of biological semiconductors like melanin in our body.
So, talking about the electron transport chain and the mitochondria, I want to talk about grounding. Why do you think this is something it's so overlooked? Why do you think it's viewed as pseudoscience?
Well, because it's too easy and it's free, right? Like, it's just like, it doesn't make any sense to people. It's free to just go outside and be barefoot. But like I just said, we need electrons. Electrons are the source of our biological functions, and in order to harness that energy of light, we need electrons, and we're never connected to the earth anymore. Like, we're beings of this planet. We're designed to be in contact with the earth.
Hmm.
Modern footwear, even if it was just like Jesus sandals, been around for what, maybe just a few thousand years, maybe longer than that, but they're all animal skins, right? They're all natural materials, which are also connecting you to the earth. They may be a little less conductive, but you're able to absorb these free electrons that are on the surface of the earth as a result of lightning strikes and thunderstorms that are constantly ongoing. The
Hmm.
earth's surface has this negative charge. It's full of electrons, and they're going to flow into your body through your hands, through your feet, because your skin has a conductivity to it. And depending on the surface, depending how wet it is, depending on wet your hands are, more electrons will flow than less, or less, depending on that. But they will flow into your body. There's a reason why the sweat gland density in your feet and your hands is exponentially higher than anywhere else in your body. And again, modern footwear is especially detrimental because we're just completely cutting off connection to the earth. So insulated, like 100% insulated, and we're definitely not absorbing any electrons from that, and we're not even grounded in any capacity when you have an insulator separating you and the ground. And that's a huge problem because we're just meant to be in contact with the surface of the earth. It helps regulate our circadian rhythm. There's studies showing that cortisol regulation. It's because it's an input signal. It's all about input signals. And when you're connected to the earth, it knows where you are
Hmm.
because you're connected to it. It knows what season it is, and it knows everything that your body needs in
That's
terms of signaling and what time it is. Like, how does it regulate cortisol? It's not like it sounds like pseudoscience, but it's been proven that it does that. It's
hmm
because your body is able to use that. And electrons carry information, and they have information from the earth, and the earth has its own electromagnetic fields. But now, and something that's really complicated is getting into grounding and in certain areas, but grounding in your home outlet. It's always best to be in nature, and grounding barefoot. That is the best. Getting in the ocean is extremely great.
hmm
Wet sand, water is extremely conductive. So why is it so, you know, looked down upon because it's free, it's very accessible, and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't align with the centralized paradigm of health in any way. But it is extremely important, and yeah, it's one of the easiest things you could do to probably be healthy. And again, that source of electrons is really important to be able to capture the energy from the sun.
Mm-hmm. And we can now hug trees during winter to ground ourselves. That's new for me.
Yeah, so the tree and it's important to distinct between grounding and then
Mhm.
like conduction, because a tree is going to ground you, and I prove that by testing the body voltage, because then
Mhm.
that'll go to zero. So like grounding electrically is, earth ground, like that's where the term comes from.
Yeah.
But the actual absorption of the electrons depends on the surface, right? And a tree, like if you're touching tree bark, it's probably not very conductive, but it's still
Mhm.
grounding you.
Mhm.
Um, Same with different like dry sand is super insulative, actually. Like you're not going to absorb a ton of electrons from like dry sand, but if it's wet sand, you will. But they'll both ground you. They'll both ground you, which is good. So there's just an important distinction there that
Okay.
people don't gets very into the electrical stuff of and it's so fun. I talk about this with like my dad and other friends that have their engineers or just into this, and I have a lot of experiments that I'm going to do coming up,
Cool.
trying to test like grounding in your yard or in cities, and it's a whole rabbit hole to go down, but it's fun.
So what I understood is that you don't receive the electrons from the ground when you hug a tree, but you do discharge your energy towards the tree because of the grounding.
Yeah, you're discharging that non-native electromagnetic field basically, which is good because you don't want that like residual EMF on your body
Mhm.
from but that's how I prove it, right? But yeah, you're still connected, right? Like so you're actually connected to the earth then. So you can get that input signal, what have you, from the earth if you're connected to it, and that's helpful. How much electrons, how many electrons you're actually absorbing from like a tree, I have no idea, but it's not going to be probably much because it's, depending on the thickness of the tree, it's probably not that conductive.
Mm.
And yeah, that's basically a difference. But like wet grass, very conductive. Wet sand, water is very conductive. So that's just the nuance in the grounding. And
You,
sorry if it's raining. I don't know if you can hear that. It
I
started
can't
pouring
hear it.
out
Yeah,
here.
no,
So
I didn't realize.
that's good. The mic is good then. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's raining out. It's raining out. The ground is wet. You can
Hmm.
definitely absorb a ton of electrons. And if there's lightning nearby, I mean, even better.
That's better. Yeah. So I've recently seen you post pictures um, on your timeline about hunting. I know you, I don't know which animal it was. You hunted an elk, I think, and you spent a night inside the leather to sleep in it, right?
So that's a bison hide I
I
have that
see.
I was
Okay.
sleeping on. And that bison is just like, from the bison ranch that I work with in
Okay.
Wyoming.
But
Um, but I was hunting for elk, yes.
mhm. So how has that impacted your life? Because every single time I hear people who just get into hunting, I hear this same story where they appreciate so much more where their food comes from, and it's just an incredible experience to hunt your own reward.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a profound experience, at least the way I did it. Like I'd never gone hunting before in my life.
Hmm.
Kind of was, living in Wyoming. It's a big thing, something I want to get into. I'm all about high quality meat. I'm all about hiking and the outdoors. So it was a no brainer. It was a pretty intimidating process, not having a dad or someone to really help you out. So I kind of
Hmm.
just put in for tags. I got some tags, which, allows you to hunt. Bought a rifle, bought some gear, started practicing. My buddy from college gave me some tips on that, on the gear, and then he flew out for my first ever hunt, which was for elk in the mountains of Wyoming on public land, and this was last year, and the beginning of October, And yeah, in 5 days, we hiked like 40 plus miles. We
Mm.
saw a bunch of elk. And then on the last night, I got really fortunate and saw a bull, and I shot a bull from 405 yards
That's incredible.
and harvested it. And it was such a profound experience because you have so many close calls. You're trying to like evaluate what to do. You're just fully immersed in nature the entire time. I mean, you're in bear country. There's nobody else around you. I mean, maybe you see like one or two other hunters like very far away, but yeah, the experience is tremendous, and you're
Wow.
totally just in it, and you realize how challenging it is as
Mhm.
well, to do all this. But then you actually get an animal down, and you have to field, dress it, butcher it, quarter it, and carry it out. And that was the hardest thing I've ever done. It
Mm.
was like 2.5, 3 mile pack out, take 2 trips because it's just two of us. You're carrying like 80 pounds in each trip, maybe 60, 70 pounds in your back, 20 pounds in your hands. The second trip, I had the, whole rack, the antlers on my back as well. So, you know, that whole experience, though, then when you get it processed, you get it out, every time you go to eat that animal for the next year, it lasts me a whole year. You channel that energy that you have in it,
Mhm.
and that's channeled in that experience. And it's just so much more meaningful. It's so much more it's the highest quality meat you could ever ask for. I mean, there's nobody around. We're talking the nearest town where I harvested that elk was an hour and a half drive, no
Wow.
service, nothing. And that's you can't get higher quality than that, but the experience really that lives on through that animal, and
Course.
then providing for yourself and your family, and then sharing that with other people. Like my favorite thing to do is my mom, my sister, my girlfriend, my friends will visit. Be like, yeah, like try this elk. Like, let me cook some elk for you. And it's really special and makes you completely change your relationship with food.
Mm.
And then all you want to do is only eat like wild game that you've hunted. But then you realize that it's not always that. I got very lucky. I got very fortunate, right? I put the work in, put myself in good situations, and we got fortunate with the shot I took worked out. That was last year. This year, complete opposite happened in
Mm.
terms of things working out. Um, my buddy flew out again, and on the we season opens October 1st. The night before, we saw all these elk, super stoked. October 1st, we get into the zone. We hike in pretty far, like 5 miles, and got on some elk. I could have taken a shot at a cow elk, which is a female elk, from 300 yards. Decided not to because it was the first day. We hiked back, and it started snowing. We're at 10,000 feet above sea level, and it's
Mhm.
just blizzard conditions. So we had to leave. Went back to my town. Tried to chase some deer for a couple of days. Saw absolutely nothing, and then
Wow.
went back to that zone the day before he had to fly out. And same exact situation as last year. It's like the last night, and it's getting dark. We saw these moose running around, which again, it's just like tremendous experience. You're just sitting on a ledge, and
Mm.
this moose is just like running around trying to get this female moose to, I don't know, hang out with him.
Mm.
But I go up this hill, take one last look. I see these elk coming out of the woods, run down the mountain to my friend. We sprint over, 3/4 of a mile to get in a position. There's all these trees in the way, on the other side of this creek. Couldn't get a shot, couldn't get a shot, couldn't get a look. And then we finally get one, and it's right on this bull elk, larger than last year. And I take the shot, get him down. He's down for, I don't know, 10, 20 seconds. I look back at my friend, like all excited, and then kind of like change my stance. And then I look back. It's getting dark as well. And he's like getting up, and the trees were so thick. I had like, probably a window like a foot wide. And by the time I got set up again to take a second shot, he was like out of the picture, out of the window, I should say. And yeah, he walked off and wasn't able to harvest them. I don't actually think that it killed him because I searched for 2 days after and found absolutely nothing, no blood trails. So
That's incredible.
heartbreaking, right? Like
Yeah.
heartbreaking experience. I don't even know. it just makes me so upset to think about that moment. But you learn from it. Again, I didn't grow up hunting, and that's all you can really ask for. And then I went out one more weekend, and again was unsuccessful. I
Mm-hmm.
had an opportunity the last morning, kind of again made some poor decisions, and closing the distance didn't work out. And yeah, that's how it goes though. Like you're in the there's no guarantee. Like you're just hiking and hiking. You could not see anything. There's many days where we pretty much saw nothing, or you see an elk for like 2 seconds and it's a mile away and
Mm-hmm.
it's gone. And you're just like, well, okay, I guess I come back here tomorrow. Maybe not. Maybe I go somewhere else. And then yeah, it's so fun. It's so challenging, but it really makes you understand the rules of nature. And there's a hierarchy. It takes work, but at the same time, there's no guarantee. There's anything could happen, and it really just is a whole nother level when you can harvest an animal and then eat that for the coming year and share that with people. So I'm I'm close to getting very obsessed with hunting, and
Yeah,
especially from like being unsuccessful this year, it's making me even more motivated
of
to
course.
get better and better. And then that was with rifle. I bought a bow, and getting into elk hunting with archery is even more immersive because you have to get even closer. So that's something I'm really excited about
Wow.
for next year. So yeah, it's just so rewarding if you do it the way kind of you're supposed to. If you go out on public land in the mountains, a lot of people sit in stands in their backyards and stuff like that and grow corn and wait for deer to come up. I don't really know. I haven't experienced hunting like that, but hunting in the mountains at high elevation is really just a life transforming experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a reason why it's become popular, right? Joe Rogan, Cameron Haynes, it's become popular for good reason because as men, I think we're meant, you get this sense of fulfillment of just
Mm-hmm.
being out there, providing, putting in that work, and then also being connected with nature. And a lot of people, if they did that, I think they'd have a much better life or a much better
Of course.
perspective on life as well.
You're wired to hunt, literally.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Did
I
you eat
hope.
your
Oh,
yeah?
sorry. What was that?
Did you eat your first hunt raw?
No, actually not, or not like on the spot. It was so
Mhm.
late, and I would like wanted to take a chomp out of the heart, but then I don't know. It was just like the craziest experience, like field butchering an elk, first ever hunt in the
Mm-hmm.
pitch black of Wyoming, where there's like bears and things, and we were just going as fast as we could to like get it out of there. But I did eat the elk like raw, but it was like frozen and then thawed many times. So I actually prefer it like raw and tartar
Mm-hmm.
because the taste is like unbelievable. It's next level. It's a very lean meat, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's when you cook it, it can get dried out very very easily. But
Yeah.
I'm stoked to do some more hunting and talk to more hunting folks in the future because, like I said, yeah, it's
I'm,
unparalleled experience.
yeah. I'm excited to see. I've never tried elk. Never.
It's good stuff.
Yeah. Tristan, what brings you most joy in life?
You know what? Honestly, just being out in nature. I love as well connecting with people and being out in nature with people that I love or are like minded. Um, that's it's just really what I'm all about. You could throw a little physical challenge in there as well if you do that in nature. Just getting on top of a mountain peak or getting on top of a little hill or something and just looking out. And I'm talking nature. It's like very isolated,
Mm-hmm.
very much you can just fully immerse yourself in it and not think about anything in terms of the modern world. You just realize how beautiful the planet is that we live on, and how if we embrace our environment and if we embrace nature,
Yeah.
you just feel so much better. I mean, like I said, I had this, some could say it's a traumatic experience of like losing a bull elk by misplacing a shot, not taking a follow up shot, and I didn't see it as such because even though I didn't recover the animal, the
You
next 2 3 days I was just in Wyoming
were.
completely by myself. There's nobody around in the mountains. Uh, all day outside, eating great food, completely immersed in the sun, like jumping in this cold creek, drinking mountain water unfiltered. And I just felt amazing. Like I was sad, but I was still like, wow, it's just such a great time out here.
Mhm.
And second to that is just empowering people to do similar things, right? Like
Mhm.
I get very passionate when people are also fired up about the same stuff that I am, because once you go down this path, like you never go back. Like once you get a taste of the real world, and I think the natural world is the real world,
Of
like you
course.
just become addicted to it. And I
Mhm.
have friends that love the outdoors, love nature, and they're not like as obsessed with health as I am, but they're still like my great friends because we just have this passion to just be outside all the time. And then if you throw the health stuff into that, being passionate about empowering people to take control of their health, because I was at such a low in my life when I had that post concussive syndrome. But then getting out of it is
Mhm.
almost more rewarding than never have experienced it in the first place. So you just realize you're like, damn, you know, I can overcome things. I can overcome anything. I got out of this. What's like a bad day at work, or what's like a stressful email or stressful situation? You're just able to overcome obstacles in life. You just become more resilient, and it's just so empowering. And if you can show people that path, and that's what I'm all about through kind of like decentralized health,
Mhm.
is I don't want to just tell you what to do and you just blindly do it. I want to be able to just show you the road, show you the path, and then let you bring that journey, accomplish that in your own way. Bring that to yourself, because you're the only person who can heal yourself. You're the only person who can take control of your life. It's just helpful maybe if you have someone to guide you or give you a couple of tips along the way. But at the end of the day, it's your life, right? So it's your decision, and you're the only one who can change it. So once you realize that, I think you'll be a lot more motivated or driven, or whatever word you want to input in there, to actually make actionable change.
That's beautiful, Tristan. And for my last question, I wanted to ask for advice, any general advice for the listeners of this podcast, or maybe myself.
Yeah, I mean, really take a good hard look in the mirror, self assess yourself. How do
Mm.
you feel every day when you wake up? Who are you? What are you passionate about? Are there things that you want to set out to achieve? What do you want to do with your life? These are all like very basic questions. But like if you just had an ideal image of what your life looks like in 5 years, 10 years, like what are you striving for? I'm not a
Mm.
big fan of like these short-term goals, like hit 200 on the bench and like run faster, blah blah blah. That
Yeah.
shit doesn't matter. What matters is you have a clear vision of like what you actually want your life to look like in 5 to 10 years. And for
Mhm.
me, that was crystal clear. Like I want to get immersed in nature. Like I want to buy land. I want to have a family, and that's living immersed in nature and homestead, and not be reliant on the centralized systems, and then bring along as many people with me to have that same vision or journey. So it doesn't have to be your vision. That's mine. I want you to think about what it is for you, because then you can start working towards that. All right, now I know what I want to achieve in this life. Then I can start working towards it. So how do I attack that? And again, this isn't about perfection. It's just about chipping away at it through consistency. And you'd be surprised at how much progress you can make in 3 to 6 months by just being very deliberate about
Mhm.
your vision and what you want to achieve. You don't have to be in the situation that you're in. And guess what? Nobody's going to help you out. There's no one coming to save your life, and
It's just you.
government handouts are bullshit. So you are in the driver's seat of your life, and we all got dealt different hands and have different things to overcome. But at the end of the day, the message is the same for everyone. It's only you can change the outcome of your life, and everybody is capable of creating a great life for themselves. You just have to believe it.
That's beautiful, Tristan. Thank you. Thank you a lot for sharing, and thank you a lot for making this happen.
Absolutely, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm excited to see what you achieve and where your show goes and everything that you'll accomplish in your life. So it's very inspiring to see someone doing this as well. Very young, you have a lot ahead of you as well. So this is what it's
Appreciate.
all
Yeah, I'm trying to bring this awareness and consciousness everywhere.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for having me, Alfonso.
Thank you, man. Give me a second, bro.